In the opening shots, we see a man named P. Patel telling writer Jan Martel that he grew up in the zoo where his father worked. Also as a child, P learned to swim under the guidance of his uncle, who always said that panic was people's greatest enemy. At school, the boy was always teased because of his name and given hurtful nicknames. At some point, P got tired of putting up with it and let his classmates and teachers know that he was not ashamed of his name. As a result, P became not only a legend of the school, but also a legend of seafaring, who was able to survive alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. However, P assured Yan that he had not gone this way alone. A certain Richard Parker was with him. And now P was preparing to tell his amazing story. It began in a French quarter in India. P's future father, being an enterprising man, decided to open a zoo in the garden. In that garden, P's future mother was just working as a botanist. P and his older brother Ravi grew up in this zoo. P was interested in several religions, practicing Hinduism, Catholicism, and Muslimism at the same time. P's father was very sick and thought that prayers would help him, but in the end it was not God but Western medicine that saved him. P's mother's parents disowned their daughter because they were against her marrying a man beneath her in social status. One day, when P was 12 years old, his family was visiting relatives who were growing tea. The boy came to church and met the priest. He asked him why God made his son suffer for the sins of all mankind. The priest explained that Jesus did it out of love for his followers. The next time God revealed himself to the boy as Allah, P's family ridiculed him for practicing 3 religions at once. The father says that to believe in everything at once is like not believing in anything at all. The father is also convinced that science has given people much more insight into the universe than religion in recent decades. Therefore, according to the parents, it is necessary to develop critical thinking. The boy remained in his opinion, and soon the moment came to test his faith for strength. One day P and Ravi, contrary to the prohibition of their parents, decided to go into the cage of a tiger named Richard Parker. In the present, Yan was surprised by such an unusual animal name, so the boys looked at the tiger. Ravi left for fear of being scolded by their parents, and P intended to feed the predator right out of his hand. He seemed unafraid. When the father saw this, he immediately stopped his son, telling him that the tiger was a beast, not a friend. The boy insisted that animals had a soul. Then the father told his helper to let a goat into the tiger's cage. The father wanted to show that animals do not think like people do. When people look into the eyes of animals, they see only a reflection of their own emotions. Upon seeing the goat, Richard Parker instantly attacked it. Several years passed. After the father's lesson, P's life lost some of its charm. He became desperate to find something that would bring him back to peace. The guy's life changed when he met a beautiful dancer named Anandi. After a dance lesson, P saw the girl in the market and followed her to ask what her dance gestures meant. Later, P showed Anandi Richard Parker, the most majestic animal in the zoo. In the evening, over dinner, the father announced that they were moving from India to Canada. The land is municipal and belongs to the city, which can take it away at any time. The father expects to sell all the animals abroad, make some money, and start life anew in Canada with his family. P promised Anandi that he would come back for her, though the guy knew he might not be able to keep his promise. Soon the family was on their way. The mother noticed her son's sadness and said he still had his whole life ahead of him. In the ship's mess hall, P refused to eat because it contained meat, which was against his religion. Because of this, the family had a conflict with the cook. The guy was cheered up by a kindly Buddhist sailor. Later, P sat next to the animal cages. The guy is sad that soon he will no longer see the animals he has cared for since childhood. But the father assures him it will be better this way. 4 days had passed on the voyage across the Pacific Ocean. As the ship was sailing over the Mariana Trench, and a violent storm began. When P heard the thunder, he woke up his brother and suggested that he go out on deck and watch the storm. Rega thought it was a bad idea, but P went anyway. It was raining hard outside, but P even liked to feel the immensity of the elements. He rejoiced like a little child, but suddenly the ship was hit by the strongest waves. Frightened, P rushed out to find his family. All the cabins were already flooded, and P could not find his father, mother, or brother. P ran out on deck again and begged someone to save his family and let the animals out. Panic was building on the ship, and people were getting into lifeboats. A zebra fell into P's boat, at which point the tether snapped. P found himself on a small dinghy amidst the waves. He tried to signal and call for help, but to no avail. Richard Parker tried to climb onto P's boat. Scared of the predator, the guy jumped into the water and saw the sinking ship with his whole family on it. P had to climb back on the boat because his strength was running out. The tiger was not here. The guy desperately called out for his mother, father, and brother, feeling guilty. He cried, left all alone in the middle of the endless ocean. As morning came, the storm gradually abated. Exhausted P began to scoop water from his boat with a bucket and pour it overboard. He did not immediately realize that in the dinghy, besides the zebra with a broken leg, there was a hyena. The predator tried to attack P, but because of the effect of tranquilizers, the beast could not do it. Suddenly, an orangutan named Orange came sailing up to the boat on a bunch of bananas. The guy felt very sorry for the animals, but they were just as frightened as he was. P kept calling for help, but he was surrounded only by the vast waters of the Pacific Ocean. The hungry hyena again tried to attack the guy, who fought off the predator with an oar. Night fell. The hyena attacked the wounded zebra. Pi tried to stop it, but was powerless to do anything. From hunger and cold, the guy began to faint. P tried to find something useful on board the boat when suddenly the hyena attacked the orangutan. So the guy was left alone with the predator. However, P had no time to do anything because the hyena was attacked by Richard Parker. P realized he couldn't handle the tiger and jumped into the water, swimming to the life preservers. When the predator fell asleep, P returned to the boat and found some canned food. For the first time in a long time, he finally ate. Besides the canned goods, there were crackers. The tiger woke up and prepared to pounce on the guy. P was again forced to go down to the lifeline, but Richard Parker tried to get to him there as well. Night fell again. P froze and cried with helplessness. The tiger was still sitting in the boat watching him. At dawn, P wrote a note and placed it in a tin can, hoping someone would ever find his message. Plucking up resolve, P looked into the boat. The guy tried not to show his fear, but he was still afraid. He had no choice but to pray. Looking at the map, the guy realized that there were no shipping lanes here. There is no shortage of fresh water because of the frequent rains, but that is where the positives end. P tried all sorts of tricks to provoke an exacerbation of seasickness in the predator. Following the advice from the book, the guy decided to show the tiger who was in charge here. He needed to mark the boundaries of his territory so that the predator would not attack. Soon Richard Parker stopped behaving aggressively and no longer attacked P. Now half of the boat belonged to P and the other half to the tiger. However, it turned out to be not so simple. Then P decides to try to make friends with Richard Parker and brings him drinking water. The guy realizes that when the tiger gets hungry, nothing can save him. To avoid becoming a victim of the predator, P decides to learn how to catch fish. That way he can feed the tiger. Soon P was horrified to see Richard Parker jump into the water and start heading straight for him. P climbed into the dinghy and kept the tiger off the boat. Richard Parker stayed in the water and swam around. He felt sorry for the poor animal, so he let the tiger get in the boat. P, in turn, went down on the makeshift raft. In the morning, P counted the rest of his food supplies. He finally managed to catch a fish. The guy cried, for he had never taken the life of any living thing before, but now Richard Parker had food. At night, P saw bioluminescent algae around his raft. It was a truly mesmerizing sight. Then P saw a huge whale that rose above the water. P also fell into the water with the last of his food supplies. The guy didn't eat anything for a long time, losing his strength. Suddenly, a flock of wedge-bellies, flying fish, flew into the boat. P and Richard Parker began to compete for the prey. The guy immediately showed the tiger who was the master here. That's how P and Richard Parker got food. The guy realized that he had to tame the tiger and make friends with him. That's the only way they could survive together. P made his first attempt to make contact with the predator. Surprisingly, Peter Parker did not attack him. For that, P encouraged him with food. The guy repeated this several times. It was like being trained in a circus. Eventually, P was able to get the tiger under control. Henceforth, they learned to coexist together. For days on end, P fished in the blazing sun. He felt more secure in the knowledge that he was not alone. They were also united by the fact that they had both grown up in the zoo and were unprepared for the rigors of life alone with nature. One day, P saw dolphins and then a ship in the distance. The guy fired 2 flares, but went unnoticed. He kept signaling until late at night, but in vain. No matter what, he did not lose hope. Many days passed. To keep from going crazy, P talked to Richard Parker, who of course could not answer him. The guy realized that the tiger was looking through the water column at the fish. The ocean was full of life. P remembers Anandi, his parents, and the sunken ship. His thoughts gradually become confused. P is no longer able to distinguish between dreams and reality. A storm was coming. P hurriedly hid the supplies in a safe place. His diary was blown away by the wind. The only thing P could do now was pray. The elements were terrifying and magnificent at the same time. P believes that God has come to them. The guy shouted to God that he was giving up because he had lost his whole family. He had nothing more to lose. But this time too, fate was merciful to P. Together with Richard Parker, they weathered the storm. Day after day passed. P and Richard Parker were already severely depleted. To make sure the tiger was alive, P poured water over his head. Now the guy was not afraid to touch the predator, but they both knew they were doomed. In tears, P placed the tiger's head on his lap and began to talk to the parents and the brother with whom he would soon be reunited. When P woke up, he found that his boat was berthed against the island. It had been so long since he had stood on solid ground that he couldn't walk right away. P began to eat the first grass he could find, and then he went into the woods. In the field he saw a huge flock of meerkats gathered for a watering hole. P was soon joined by Richard Parker, who began hunting the small animals. At sunset, the guy saw the meerkats begin to scatter, and the tiger returned to their boat. P slept right up in the tree among the meerkats. When he woke up, he saw a dead fish in the lake below. In the flour, the guy discovered a tooth. P realized that this island was a predator. What it gave during the day, it took away at night. Even the water, which was fresh during the day, became poisonous after sunset. The tooth most likely belonged to a man who, like P, had once been marooned here. P realized that God had given him a sign that it was time to continue his journey. After restocking on fresh water and food, P prepared to set sail with his friend Richard Parker. Even in the present tense, P still could not find this mysterious Meerkat Island on the map. Soon P and Richard Parker reached the coast of Mexico. By this time they were both exhausted. After struggling to get ashore, P collapsed on the sand, and Richard Parker went into the jungle to be free. A few hours later, people found P. As they carried him away, he cried like a baby, not from happiness, but from the fact that Richard Parker had abandoned him so easily. In the present, P also cries. Despite everything, he believes that he and the predator were connected by something more than survival. Jan Martel was shocked by this incredible story. P continued his story. Representatives of the shipbuilding company visited him at the Mexican hospital to get to the bottom of the situation. Of course, they didn't believe his story. The staff needed a simpler version for the report, so in his story, P replaced the surviving animals with human beings who were fighting for survival. They were P himself, his mother, the injured sailor, and the sneaky cook. Everyone ended up dead, except P, who was drifting alone in the Pacific Ocean. That sounded much more plausible, though the shipbuilding company representatives didn't like that version anyway. Jan realized that the injured Buddhist sailor was the zebra, the orangutan was the mother, the hyena was the cook, and Richard Parker was P. The man asked the writer which story he preferred. Jan replied that the one with the tiger in it. P thanked him for this and agreed to give his story to Jan as an idea for his new book. P is happy now. He has a beloved wife and 2 children. To this day, however, P can't stop thinking about Richard Parker, who went to the jungle forever.